Have you been sticking with the same sound from your floor tom for as long as you can remember? Are you starting to get sick of it? Well, today we are going to do 3 very different examples of experiments you can do with your floor tom in the same tuning range that get wildly different results. Today, we're going to introduce you to 3 sounds that we use often in this floor tom. We're also going to tell you why we're doing it and exactly how we achieve those sounds so you can get them at home if you choose to. Each of these examples has built-in benefits and drawbacks. None of them are for everything, but that's what makes each of them so special. Most of the time when we talk about the range of an instrument in the drum set, we mean pitch, high or low or medium, somewhere in its range. But today we're talking about a different kind of range, specifically what kind of sounds we can get out of the drum while staying inside of a similar pitch range. For the sake of clarity, instead of talking in terms of range for this experiment, we're going to talk in terms of character, because realistically, inside of this floor tom that we're working with today, there's a lot of different characters in there. These can range from very dry and short sounds to extremely resonant sounds, and even to sounds that imply some kind of effect has been added on top of them that you wouldn't even expect out of a drum. First up for today, we're going to be going for essentially as low as we possibly can without fully gutting out the tension on the heads. This presents a little bit differently than the average floor tom because we've gotten rid of a lot of the sustain and brought it into a much punchier range that again is also super duper low. This is going to mesh really well with the bass drum when we do linear fills in between the two, or if we want to just play something busier without all of that sustain getting in the way. Down in this range, because we have so little tension on the batter head, we're also getting a tremendous amount of attack, which is excellent for playing quicker fills and also for allowing us to get into the drum and then get away from it again quickly without a lot of sustain afterward. If you're enjoying this sound and you're following along with the drum while you're watching, here are some of the procedures that got us to this sound. We're using a 2-ply coated batter head. The extra mass in that head is helping us to get this really low tuning. We're also utilizing a few cotton balls inside of the drum that have been spread out together into a mat. 5 or 6 cotton balls seems most effective for a 16-inch drum, and it's really helping to control that sustain. We are also using a standard 10mm Reso head, which is allowing us to dial in some tone into the drum, which is then controlled by those cotton balls. The first step to getting here is to take off one of the heads so that we can put the cotton balls inside so they can do their job on the resonant head. Once the cotton balls are inside, reinstall the head that you removed and adjust both heads to finger tight. At this point, give the drum a couple of hits because we are really going for a low tuning here, so this may actually be enough tension to get the desired sound. If you want a little more tone in the drum or you feel like you want a little more bass in there, very slowly add tension to the resonant head, but for now, let's leave tension where it's at on the batter. The resonant head is bringing the tone into the drum, which generally speaking is what the resonant head's primary job is. As we add tension to it, we're going to be adding possible sustain. And then with muffling inside via the cotton balls, we're reducing that sustain so that we can get the low end quickly and then have the sustain pushed down. On the batter end of the drum, if you're getting unusual overtones or growliness that doesn't sound great for what you're looking for, very slowly add a little bit of tension to that head as well. At these low tensions, getting the head in tune with itself is doubly important because there's going to be a lot of wiggle room between each of these lugs at this tension, and we want to make sure that we're getting good, clean contact of the head all the way around the bearing edge. Once you've achieved a sound that's making you happy, feel free to experiment both with the resonant side head and also the batter, because again, we are just in a range right now, and if you want to adjust the character a little bit, small changes to either one of them is going to give you something completely different. Okay, for sound number 2, we decided to go a little further out with this one. This is an experimental sound. It's not an everyday kind of thing, but it's also something that we really love here, and we were able to capture it beautifully today. Okay, before you totally freak out, this is, as we said, a really left of center kind of sound. But this is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about experimentation and getting inspired by the possibilities in a drum. This is the same heads on the same drum with an adjustment to tuning that gave us something that almost sounds synthetic, or like something from a drum machine or something that's been affected after the fact. Anything we can do to find a new sound in drums we already have is worth the trouble, and it adds something to the palette that can be super exciting for just the right musical experience. We are talking about the growl that's coming out of this batter head. This is a sound that I associate, and we associate, with electronic music, and also again with drums that have been affected or maybe even stretched digitally somehow. Let's hear a little more of that sound in context, and then we'll talk about how we did it. What we're talking about here is that incredible growl that's coming off of the batter head on the floor tom. This is fairly easy to achieve coming from the previous tuning, which is what we're doing today, and involves reducing tension on one of the tension rods on the batter side head to reduce contact of the head on the edge of the drum. This creates an area of extreme low tension compared to the rest of the head and allows it to resonate in a different way than the rest of the head is. In this case, the head is literally fluttering against the bearing edge in that spot where the rest of the head is seated firmly against it. This gives us wild, sustained, interesting interactions between overtones, and it becomes more prominent as we move toward the lug that is lower than the rest. The first thing that we did was experiment with reducing tension on one or possibly two of the lugs on the batter side. We ended up just going with one. Once we were happy with the behavior we were getting at the growly, reduced tension lug, and also played the drum in the center a little bit to make sure that that was still working, I made very slight adjustments to the resonant head, specifically a very small reduction in tension on that head to really drive home how much of that growl we wanted to have. When we talk about growl, we're really talking about a sound in the decay of the strike. The attack on this drum is not dissimilar from the previous, but now we've built in this wild sustain into the duration of the rest of the sound. Where the first sound in the examples today was punchy and short and really lent itself to fast playing and intricate stickings, if we do that same kind of playing on a drum setup this way, it almost negates the coolness of this sound because the special part of it is in the decay, and it really lends itself to slower, more legato playing and opportunities where you can hear all of that decay. With more extreme sounds like this, similarly to how we tune a drum to get a more standard sound, it's really worth experimenting how much you need to change one of the tuning rods, or two or more of them, to get exactly what you're looking for. Every little adjustment is going to get you a slightly different sound. So take your time, remember to be patient, and try to see if you like something that's just a little left of center like this. For our final third character out of this drum in this range, we're going to be going for a little bit more traditional of a sound, emphasis on round tone and more sustain. Of the three sounds today, this one is the most traditional. There's some tone afterward, there's good attack, and overall, this would fit into most any situation where you're looking for a fat, big, and low floor tom sound. As with the previous two, the cotton balls are still inside, they're still doing their job, but because of some adjustments we've made, there's more tone in the drum as well as more sustain. The biggest thing that we're getting back in this iteration of our experiment is dynamics, especially dynamics with full tone. Have a listen to this example. The first thing to happen when we tune very, very low, as we've been doing today, is we lose our lower dynamics and start to have a very thin sound when we play close to the drum, where, on the other hand, digging in really hard on any of the previous examples sounds really good. In the case of this tuning, I have a good full sound with resonance and sustain even an inch off of the drums, which is really exciting for opportunities where you know you're going to be moving through a wide dynamic range. This doesn't mean that this drum can't also sit well in the mix and be beautiful in more aggressive, busy, or any other playing situation. The flip side of it is that we're going to have a little more sustain and drag at the end of each of the notes. Let's hear this one in a little more context. As with the previous examples, as I said before, we have the cotton balls still inside. We're still using the same drum heads, and we measured it. The batter head in this iteration is the same tension as the first example. The big difference here is we've increased tension substantially to the resonant head. This just goes to show you the power of that resonant head that we never see, that's on that hidden other side of the drum. The tone, the sustain, and the body of the drum actually lives in that resonant head, and the batter head can only benefit from those adjustments. If we were to add more muffling or more cotton balls or make other adjustments, we could work within this tuning here to get a punchier sound or a tighter sound. But as you can see today, just by adjusting the resonant head from the first example, it's taken it into a very different place while still remaining in the same pitch range and giving us a different kind of inspiration for what kind of fills we want to play. There's a lot to be gained from giving ourselves artificial limitations when we're experimenting and practicing to keep us in a narrow lane and force some creativity. It's easy enough to take a drum and tune it into a different pitch range just to have something different, but what would happen if we did what we did today and stuck in the same range and tried to get as different and interesting of sounds out of that range as we possibly could? Especially if you play similar music most of the time, or you play in a band where you're trying to go for a similar range all the time, learning what you can do within that range only serves to inspire the possibilities and expand your palette from what you're already using. When you sit down next time to start some of these experiments, give yourself an assignment. Stay in the range that's comfortable for you, whatever that may be, for your floor tom, for instance, and pick one aspect of the sound to try to manipulate, whether it's the sustain, the attack, the tone, whatever it might be. Limit it down and see just how much you can do with that one part of the sound. If we try to do everything all the time, it can be overwhelming, and one thing at a time will really help us to get where we want to go.